The neckline is a visible part of anything we make, and how our neckline turns out can make or mar our entire outfit. In this video, I'll be showing you 5 different methods of finishing your neckline neatly and perfectly like a pro. So if this is something you're interested in, watch till the end so that you don't miss out on any vital information. So we'll be starting with the facing method. Okay, so I'm gonna have to cut this neckline to use this to illustrate how to go about the facing method. So I'm gonna head to fold my fabric. Remember that we cut our bodies on fold. Okay, so I'm gonna head to fold my fabric and then I'm pinning it down. And then after I've done that, I'll go ahead to bring in this African print fabric that I'll be using for my facing. So this fabric is my facing, and you can see that it is on fold, and also my main fabric too is on fold. So I'll place my main fabric on the material I want to use for my facing, and I will arrange it properly, making sure that the middle of my fabric, my main fabric, and the middle of the facing aligns. All right, and then I'll pin it down so that it doesn't move, just as you see me do in the video. I have done that. You go ahead to cut out the neckline and the shoulder. But when you are cutting your facing, there's no rush. All right, so I'll take out my pin just as you see me do, and then I'll go ahead to mark 2 inches all round from the neckline I cut out. Okay, so I like to use 2 inches for my facing. You can as well use 2.5 inches if you want, and then I'll just use my chalk to mark it all round. So I'll go ahead to cut it out. So this is what we have for our facing. Okay, you can see that your facing mirrors the neck of your main fabric. This is how to cut your facing perfectly. Okay, so I also have this neckline that I had cut out already, and I've gone ahead to cut out the facing for the neckline off camera using the exact method I showed you earlier. If you don't know how to draft and cut different type of beautiful necklines, you can click on this link up here because I have a detailed video where I showed you that. So I'm placing these two side by side because I want to show you 2 different methods of finishing your neckline with a facing. So for this, I've gone ahead to press in 1/2 inch all round with my steaming iron. All right, I just pressed in 1/2 inch all round. So now I'll go ahead to place my facing on my main fabric, and I'm placing the right side of my facing on the wrong side of my main fabric. Right side of my facing on the wrong side of my main fabric. So I'll go ahead to arrange it properly, and then I'll pin it down so that it doesn't move. When you're working with a neckline, it's very important to have your pins, so always hold it down so that it doesn't move. All right, so that it's not difficult when you're stitching. So after I've done that, I would go ahead to sew by 1/4 inch. So I've done that, and this is what I have. Okay, one of the secrets to having a relaxed and flat neckline is that your neck seam allowance is not bulky. So I'm seeing some bulky areas, so I'll go ahead to trim it off. It's very important that your sewing allowance at the neckline is not bulky. So now I'll go ahead to notch my neckline. This is a very important step. This is like the magic of having a relaxed neckline. Once you notch the neckline, what you are doing is you are easing the tension around the neckline, especially around the curves or the angles on the neckline. Be careful when you are notching your neckline so that you don't cut into the stitches that you have made. So I'll go on to turn my facing and then iron it out. Okay, when you are dealing with your neckline, it's very important that you are generous with your ironing. Okay, this is one of the secrets to a professional neckline, ironing it. So this part of making a neckline takes time, so you take your time, arrange it, iron it in place. All right, generously. So now I'll take this to my sewing machine and I'll go on to sew just at the edge. All right, neatly round. I call this type of facing a decorative facing because you are using this facing to finish the edge of the neckline, and you're also using it to design your outfit. So it's a 2-in-1 facing. I'm done sewing the edge of this facing, and this is the final look. This is the right side of our fabric, and you can see how neat our neckline looks. Okay, now to the other method of using a facing, which is the popular method. I'll place my facing on my main fabric, right side facing the right side. Okay, so the right side of my facing is on the right side of my fabric, and I'll go ahead to pin it down so that it doesn't move. Okay, so after pinning it down, I'll go on to sew 1/4 inch round. Remember that your neck seam allowance should not be bulky. Very important. So I've gone ahead to sew my neckline, and this is what I have. Okay, so now I'll go on to notch my neckline. So another important thing to notice, if you need more structure or more stability for your neckline, you can add a soft interfacing like your ST. You can add that to your facing to give the neckline more structure and stability depending on what you are making. All right, get ready to iron, arrange, iron. So when you are working with your neckline, you must not be tired of ironing. This step is very crucial in making your neckline. So after I'm done ironing, you can see how beautiful our neckline is looking. So let's turn it to the wrong side. Go on to overlock the edge of your facing. Okay, because I don't have an overlocking machine around me right now, I'll just proceed to do the next thing. But please make sure you overlock your facing before you then hold it down with hemming gum. So the hemming gum will help your facing to stay in place and it will not be moving up and down. It won't be showing outside on your outfit. Okay, so I'll go ahead to give this a good press, and this is what we have after we are done. Look at how polished and relaxed and flat this neckline looks in. So this is the front and this is the back. So you can see the two methods of using your facing. For this one on my right, you can see that my facing is showing on the right side of the fabric. But on the other one, you can see that the facing is on the wrong side of the fabric. Let's move to the lining method of finishing your neckline. So now I've gone ahead to cut this beautiful neckline, which I'll be using to illustrate the lining method of finishing your neckline. This black fabric is what I'll be using to line the main fabric. You can see that is exactly what I have on the main fabric that I have on my lining. So I'll just place the lining on the fabric, right side facing the right side, and I'll go ahead to arrange it properly, just as you see me do. Afterwards, I'll pin it down so that it doesn't move when I'm sewing. It's very important that when you are making your neckline, when you are sewing your neckline, always pin it down so that it is easier when you are stitching it on your sewing machine. So I'll go ahead to sew 1/4 inch all around my neckline and also my side. Okay, I'm done sewing and I'll go on to notch my neckline carefully so that I don't notch it into the areas I've stitched. Okay, so you have to be careful when you're notching. Notching is very important. Do not sew your neckline without notching it. So now I'll go on to turn it out just as you see me do, and after that I'll go ahead to iron. Ironing is the magic. Ironing takes your neckline from a 0 to 100. So just be generous with your ironing. Take your time. Iron it properly. Let it stand well. Let it stay well. See how our neckline is giving what a perfect neckline should give. Alright, so let's move to the bias method. It is used to finish the necklines of simple wears, casual wears, simple outfits. So we have the ready-made bias tape that is available in various colors, and you can get this at tailoring material shops. I have some of the colors here as you can see in the video, but for the purpose of this tutorial I'll be showing you how you can make your own bias tape. So I'll be using this fabric to make my own bias tape. And when you're making your bias tape, you do not cut it horizontally like this. You cut it diagonally. You cut it at 45 degrees, all right, which is called the bias grain. Okay, so I'm marking the lines diagonally at 45 degrees so that I can make my own bias tape. And usually bias tape is usually 1 inch, all right, so you can see me marking my 1 inch all round. So depending on how much bias tape you want to make, so you go ahead and mark 1 inch, all right. So I'll just make as many as I need, and after I've marked 1 inch all through, I will then go on to cut it out. So there are two bias tape method, and we'll be starting with the bias facing method. So now I have my bias tape and I'll just place it over my fabric, right side facing right side. All right. So, and I'll just go on to sew 1/4 inch all round. All right. The bias tape is cut diagonally at 45 degrees, which is the stretchiest part of a fabric. And that's why you can manipulate it into our round neckline easily. All right, so I'm done sewing 1/4 inch. As you can see, make sure you sew exactly 1/4 inch. You can see the right side and you can see how neat the right side is looking. I've gone ahead to iron it properly, and now you can see the wrong side too, and you can see how neat it's looking. You can see that it's exactly 1/4 inch all round. So at this wrong side of the fabric, you go ahead to fold twice. All right, you go ahead to fold the first time and then you fold again, making sure that the bias is not showing at the right side. You can see how I did the folding. So I want to do it again. You can see that I've done the first folding and then this is the second folding, and then no bias tape is showing at the right side. All right, you must make sure the bias tape is not showing at the right side. So you pin it down and I'll go ahead to do the same all through. I'll fold the first time, as you can see, and I'll fold again, ensuring that my bias tape is not showing. The bias tape method is one of the simplest and fastest method of finishing your neckline. So I'll go ahead to sew it neatly at the edge of the folded bias tape. So I'm done and you can see what we have. This is the wrong side. You can see how neat the wrong side is and you can see how neat the right side is. So this is our right side. You can see how beautiful and how neat the finishing is. So now to the bias binding method. I have my fabric here and I also have my bias tape here. Okay, now this is the right side of my fabric. So for this method, I will turn it to the wrong side. So this is the wrong side of my fabric, and then I'll place the right side of my bias tape on the wrong side of my fabric. So I'm trying to show you how stretchy this is because it was cut on bias grain. And then I'll just pin it down and I'll go and sew by 1/4 inch. Make sure you sew exactly 1/4 inch. Okay, so now this is the right side of my fabric and you can see that I've gone ahead to stitch down 1/4 inch and I'll go ahead to double fold. And this is the first folding and then I'll fold again neatly. All right, so for me, my go-to neck finishing method is the facing method. But right now, the piping method, which is the last finishing method I'll be showing you, is my favorite. So let me know in the comment section which is your best finishing method. Which one do you use often? Please write yours in the comments and I'll see you there. And I'll go on to sew at the edge neatly. And after I'm done, I would also give it a good press. Don't forget how important ironing is in your neckline making. So this is what we have and you can see how beautiful this neck finish is. I love this neckline because it's a design type of facing. You can design your neckline as well as finish your neckline properly. So you can see how the wrong side look like and how the right side look like. So you can see the difference between the two. The bias binding, you can see the bias tape on the right side of the fabric, but for the bias facing, you cannot see the bias tape on the right side of the fabric. So let me show you the piping method of finishing your neckline. I have this beautiful neckline cut out already and I've gone ahead to cut out a facing for it. I already showed you how to cut a perfect facing. So I'll place my facing on my fabric, right side facing right side. I'll go ahead to arrange it properly, take it to my sewing machine and go ahead to sew 1/4 inch all round. So I'm stitching my facing to my fabric with 1/4 inch and you can see how I'm maneuvering the sharp corners. All right, I'll use my presser foot lifter to raise my presser foot up and then I'll turn it and I'll put my presser foot back down and then I'll continue sewing. So if you have gotten to this point, please give this video a like. Please support the channel by liking this video and sharing this video. Thank you. And then I'll go ahead to cut off the bulky area. Remember that your seam allowance for your neckline must not be bulky for you to have a flat and relaxed neckline. I will then go on to notch. Notching is very important. Do not skip notching, okay? So I'll go ahead to notch my neckline carefully so that I don't cut into my stitches, especially around those corners. I'll go ahead to notch my neckline carefully, and after that we'll proceed to open it up and then sew. So pay attention to this area so that you can understand very well. Okay, so you go ahead to sew at the edge, all right, the line between the main fabric and the facing. That's where you're going to sew. All right, so when you are doing this piping method, you have to like eye gauge. You have to gauge it with your eyes so that it is equal on all ends. All right, so that one side is not bigger than the other. Okay, so you need to eye gauge it properly when you are, doing this piping method. All right, and it's so easy, so beautiful. I'm loving this method at the moment. In fact, I just love the design that it gives to the neckline. The neckline is giving this subtle yet classy design. Would you be trying this out? Let me know in the comment section. I went ahead to give it a good press, and this is what we have. So I will go ahead to overlock the edge of my facing, and then I will then hold it down with my hemming gun. All right, I can also decide to just double fold the edge depending on how you want to finish the edge of your facing. And so this is what we have. If you want to know how to draft and cut 15 different type of beautiful necklines, then you should click on this video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.